Hi, friends. This is Sandra Peoples. I am one of your co hosts for Key Ministry, the podcast, and this is episode 95. That's a lot of episodes. And today I am super excited because my friend Tracy McElhatten is with us, and she's going to talk about universal design for learning. Really, what we're talking about is how do we take the curriculum in our typical mainstream Sunday school classes and make sure that everybody has access to the learning and applying what they're learning. Kids with disabilities, kids without disabilities, everybody has better access to the main point of the lesson. And so that's really what universal design for learning is about. I met Tracy because we were on a advisory team together for Lifeway, but I already knew about Tracy because when I taught first and second grade Sunday school, we used Lifeway's Bible Studies for Life curriculum. And in the back of that curriculum, there are alternative activities and ways to apply lessons for kids with special needs. I think that's what the title of it says. And Tracy writes those. And so I was using her material even before I had put together that she was the one writing it. And we're both really big Oklahoma State fans. And so
Yay,
we
go
bonded with that. I have to say Oklahoma State instead of OSU because our most of our key ministry team is in Ohio. And so if I say
Oh, yeah.
OSU, they're like Ohio State. I'm like, no, the
Mhm.
Cowboys, Oklahoma State
And
University.
they make sure and say the Ohio State
They
University,
do.
I'm sure.
I
Yes.
know they do. Yeah, I know. We won't be too hard on them, but
No, no.
you know, we do have the
Yes.
brightest orange. So,
It's America's brightest orange. It's the best.
So I'm super excited to have Tracy with me. Tracy, just tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump in.
Sure. So I currently am on staff at Blue Valley Church in Overland Park, Kansas. I have been here for almost 9 years, which is just absolutely crazy to me because it's gone by in a hurry. But I am the director of early childhood, so I work with our preschool and kindergarten kiddos. Um, but in addition to that, I also work for Lifeway, just contract writing, and I help write their Special Buddies curriculum, which is part of Bible Studies for Life. And then I also write that article, like you said earlier. But in my prior life, before ministry, I was an early childhood special education teacher. I did that for several years, and my heart was really inclusive education. I used to work for Stillwater Public Schools in Oklahoma and got to work with some fantastic teachers and families, and we really worked hard at making sure our program was inclusive. And that was really the first time that program had done that. And I just learned a lot through that. Ended up moving to go to the University of Kansas to get a PhD in special education. I wanted to be a professor. That was my dream. But the Lord just called me otherwise. And so here I am on staff at a church, and it's really opened a lot of doors to be able to meet cool people like you and be able to help churches learn how to be more inclusive. And that has just been a huge unexpected blessing, and I love it. So that's, and then besides that, I'm a wife and a mother, and that's one of the best jobs, of course.
That's fun. That's really cool, though, that I mean, what a blessing to the church to have somebody with your experience and with your education. And I mean, like all of our churches, like specifically your church, but all of us who use Lifeway curriculum, all of us who get to listen to this
Yeah,
podcast and learn from your experiences. I just love how
totally
God
understood.
like weaves that together, and takes
And
everything.
he continues to confirm it too in like the most unexpected ways. This is a side note, but I had visited with a professor a couple of years ago, kind of trying to think about, do I want to stay in church or do I want to try to go back into university work? And I brought my professor like my curriculum or my CV, my resume, and some other things that I had done for Lifeway, and I showed them to her, and we had this long conversation about like where I could probably be a professor and that sort of thing. But when it came to the end, she saw like the curriculum that I had helped provide and the work that I was doing, and she's not a believer, okay? Not a believer. And she said, "Why in the world would you go anywhere else? You're the only person that I know of doing what you do. Why would you go anywhere else? And it was just like the Lord saying, you need to stay exactly where you are.
Wow.
So he continues to confirm that call, and it's a blessing and just totally humbling sometimes.
Yeah, that's really cool. Did you work on this year's VBS special buddy stuff?
No, I don't do anything with the VBS.
Okay.
So I think there's another gal on my special buddies team. I think she does a lot of it possibly. But yeah, I don't do VBS.
Yeah, we're looking at it. Really, like the overall theme, like everybody's theme this year, I really like. It's got a very kind of
Yes.
apologetics feel
Yes, my
to it.
children's minister and I are just absolutely thrilled with how it's addressed something that is so relevant for kids this year.
Yeah. I think for at our church, we do like inclusive kids, any kid can come to VBS, but this year we're doing a very specific one in July for kids with more profound disabilities.
Oh,
And
okay.
so that's where we'll use the special buddies curriculum. And then in our other class, like regular VBS, we'll just make some adaptations. But
Modifications.
this is the first time we've done a disability specific VBS, and we're super excited about it.
That's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be fun. We're gonna just do it once a like Wednesday mornings for the month of July. So
Oh,
that's
that's a good plan.
yeah, I think it'll be fun. So okay, well, let me tell you everybody who's listening why we're talking about universal design for learning today. And so I am taking classes, and even though my classes are in family ministry and children's ministry, specifically childhood development, I always kind of put a disability bent to everything that I write because that's the area that I'm in. And so I contacted you a couple of months ago and said, hey, can we talk about how you make lessons accessible, like how you do that at your church, how you do that for Lifeway, all the ways you do that. And when we talked, you're like, well, yeah, it's universal design for learning principles. And I was like, this is brand new information to me. And so I took lots of notes, wrote my paper on universal design for learning,
Awesome.
turned it in on Tuesday. And so this is all very fresh for me. And so I'm excited that we get to sit down and talk about it in detail. And so why don't you like kind of summarize what universal design for learning is and give us all, so we're all kind of on the same page of what we're talking about.
Yeah, so I do want to say about universal design for learning. A lot of people will say, like, what are good teaching principles and whatnot? And a lot of people will answer, well, you need to know about learning styles. And if you actually delve into the research, learning styles are a myth, and they are not good, scientifically based teaching principles. It's just
Interesting.
completely a myth. Because what does work is universal design for learning. And it does kind of take into consideration like how children or students of any type are learning, but it's really about the ways you prevent or present information. But UDL is really just a framework. It's a lot of different stuff, but it can be applied to any domain. So anything that you're doing, whether it's secular classroom teaching or it's within, it makes sense because it's a way to ensure that all learners can both access and participate in meaningful ways with whatever learning opportunity it is. So that's what UDL is. And it kind of gets that name from, like, you may be familiar with universal design in architecture, and
Yeah.
that's things like curb cuts on the sidewalk. They benefit people with mobility issues, but they also benefit moms with strollers. It benefits everybody. Or it could be like, larger size dressing rooms. Those are for people with wheelchairs, but it also benefits moms with strollers. Again, it's just ways that benefit everybody to make things more inclusive and accessible. So that's where UDL kind of comes from.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And we have a biblical principle for it, right? Like like Luke 14, the parable of the great banquet, which we talk a lot about in disability ministry, but the master of the house has invited these people, they can't come, so he sends the servant out, and then the servant invites the people with disabilities, and then he says, the master says, hey, like who all can come? And he says, well, there's still room for everybody. So we started with the people with disabilities, and then there's still room for everybody to attend. And so essentially, when we kind of start with accessibility in mind, everybody benefits from that. So the kids who need that accessibility, and then the kids who may not necessarily need it, but certainly benefit from these options for learning, ways to apply, and then ways to like express what they have learned. That's one of my favorite parts of it, is the multiple ways of expressing what they've learned. So it's really exciting. So before we jump into all the technical stuff, let me say that in the show notes, we're going to have a link to a graphic organizer, which is a UDL principle too.
Yes.
And it's going to show people the three kind of buckets that we're going to talk through. So if you're going to listen, and you can click on the link and you can see a visual representation of what Tracy's going to talk through. So that way even if we have learned now that auditory and kinesthetic and visual learners may not be as accurate as we thought they were, at least we know we're going to present this material in different modalities. Is that the right word?
Yes, you can use multiple senses to get information and retain it.
That's awesome. All right. So walk us through kind of the three buckets of UDL.
Yes. So there are three different categories of ways that we can think about how to modify, how to adapt, and how to include everybody. And the first one, there are technical terms for it. This one, though, is about engagement in learning, and it's really about the why. You're giving kids a reason to come and participate in the activities or whatever the learning opportunity is. And you want to give them as many options as you can. And part of that is knowing your students, which I think is very important. None of this matters if you don't know who your students are and you don't have a relationship with them, because everybody learns better in context of relationship. So you need to know your students, know what they like, what's interesting to them, what's going to pique their interest, and just make them want to learn something. So that's kind of what engagement is in a nutshell. But then there's several things within engagement that you can modify or that you can present information about that help kids get involved. And that's things like giving lots of choice and autonomy in learning, right? I mean, if you think about yourself, would you rather have a choice and get to pick your own direction, or do you just want to be told what to do all the time? Yeah. Like we talked about, making activities relevant. I know that can be kind of hard sometimes, but you know what your context is and what your kids are dealing with and what matters to them. So use those things. And then another thing that I think is really important on the why of learning is varying the level of sensory stimulation that you give. Okay. So if you have activities that are busy and loud all the time, some of your kids are going to check out and they're not going to learn anything. But if you have activities that are just quiet and independent all the time, you're also going to have kids that are very difficult to engage and are going to become behavior problems. Yeah. If you have more than one kid in your family, you probably have one of each of those.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And then also varying social demands as well. You have, introverts and extroverts. So do you have some activities that allow for reflection and maybe some independence? Or do you always require like group think and group projects, which are very stressful for some people, me included? Like I don't want to be in a group project if I can at all avoid it. Yeah. So varying those social demands.
Yeah, that's super helpful.
Yes. And then I think another really important part of the engagement piece is making a safe and predictable classroom environment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like making sure kids know what's expected of them, what they're going to be participating participating in. And some of that is like providing a consistent routine, providing visual schedules, also like creating expectations for work. You're in class right now. I'm also in class right now. It bugs me to no end when a professor presents something and then doesn't tell you what they expect.
Yeah.
And like if you turn in your work and then you get it back and it's a terrible grade because they say that's not what you wanted, I'm like, well, why didn't you just tell me what you wanted and I would have done that?
Yeah.
So tell what your expectations are, even if it's just super simple. You're doing a Sunday school lesson. Okay, while we're sitting here, I expect you to have your mouth quiet and your ears listening, even if it's just as simple as that, just letting kids know what those expectations are.
Yeah. That's super helpful. I was thinking
Yeah.
through as I was kind of writing, I thought about the words invitation and expectation. So like let's give them an invitation to what we want them to participate in and then show them the expectations that we have
Yes.
during that time. And so I kept kind of just thinking through scenarios in a regular children's ministry classroom. What is the invitation and what is the expectation? What is, and kind of because some children's ministries are sensory overload, right? Like all the kids are in the same room
Absolutely.
and they're jumping and they're dancing and there's lights and like some kids love that. And Tracy and I as little kids didn't probably we still wouldn't like
Please
sometimes
don't make me walk into a loud room with lots of people.
yeah. Sometimes I help in our 2 and 3-year-old class and I'm like, whoa, like I can do it occasionally, but it is kind of sensory overload and not even like just from the kids, it's sensory overload, not even like the classroom itself.
Absolutely. I
So,
teach my threes and pre-K group, large group sometimes, and it's very well managed, but I like to say that's because I'm a good teacher, but it's not. It's because I have sensory needs
uh-huh.
and I need it to be quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I do think sometimes the classroom does take on like when I taught high school English and I'm an introvert. I hate group work. So I very rarely assigned group work, but there were kids who enjoyed that. And if I were to go back and do it again, I would at least provide options for that,
mhm.
or kind of have
And
a better
like
balance.
and when you're grouping up people too, if you can do the grouping as a teacher, I think that's also takes the social pressure off of trying to find a good group to work with or, getting stuck with somebody that it doesn't work very well with.
Yeah.
So the more like you as a teacher can help with grouping, if you're going to do a grouping situation, I think it's better,
Yeah.
especially when you have kids with disabilities in your group, in your classroom who maybe aren't able to get themselves in a group. If you can facilitate that connection yourself, then the better off everybody is going to be.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. So the first one, provide multiple means of engagement. Now take us
Yes.
through the second one.
So the second one is called providing multiple means of representation, which I don't really like the way these are named
Yeah.
because like what does that even mean?
Uh-huh.
This one I think is really a lot of the crux of UDL because it's presenting your information. This is what you're doing as a teacher, presenting it in multiple different ways.
Okay.
And this is kind of like the learning styles thing. But it's presenting information. I like to ask really, how many senses have you engaged? And that helps me like when I'm writing curriculum or when I'm teaching, that helps me just think about, okay, all the different kids in my class, that probably hits all their different learning styles basically. But, provide thinking about the senses. So they've heard you say something, but can they also see what you're trying to say? Providing a visual aid of some sort, whether it's the word itself, if you have readers, or a picture, if you have pre-readers, something like that. And then can they tie emotion with both the verbal word and the visual with that? So now you've got three senses involved. Can they say something out loud at the same time? And just the more that you can engage their whole brain, the better off, the more chances of retention you're going to have. And there's like a a whole field of brain science that can tell you all about that.
Yeah.
But engaging all those senses, that's like the biggest portion of multiple means of representation.
Yeah.
But another way I think that's important is providing choices in how kids participate and how they respond. So, giving them an opportunity to respond individually, or giving them an opportunity to respond maybe to a peer, or, have a peer-to-peer conversation, something like that. Or maybe they want to write something down, or maybe they need to tell you something one-on-one and not in front of the group. Um, just, think about different ways to respond to information. I also like to use music a lot of times. That's really helpful. Um, and then like reflection. I like to journal, but a lot of people hate journaling. But I love that as
Yeah.
an introvert. Please let me respond by myself.
Yeah.
So that's another way. And then also, how can you as a teacher just keep highlighting what kids are supposed to be learning?
Okay. Yeah.
Um, they forget, we all get lost in the details. But the more you can keep like your learning objective, or, the main life point for the day, or, whatever you're supposed to be doing, help kids know what the main thing is, and just keep coming back to that so that they can make those connections in their brain, and it'll stick. The more you repeat something, the more it'll stick.
Yeah. I love that. So in the VBS curriculum, one of the lessons is Daniel and his friends. And so let's just like talk through that, because like if you're a Sunday school teacher and you're teaching Daniel and his friends, and how they said, and Daniel and his friends said, we're not going to eat what the king is providing, we're going to eat what God says is clean. They had this testing period, and then they came back and they were healthier and stronger than people who had eaten meat and everything. And so I think that's a really good lesson, because there's so many senses you can incorporate,
Mhm.
right? So you could bring in fruit and vegetables and say, let's eat the food that
Yes.
Daniel and his friends ate. But then I also really like the application of it to say, would you stand up for what you believe? There's going to be times, even as a young kid, like there's
Mhm.
times where you may have peer pressure to make you do something that God has told you not to do. So how do you
Mhm.
respond? And so
And
all
that's a good way to like think about how you know your students. Like, what are they facing? And bringing that in. That's a really good opportunity to help them make that connection. Is it, like, do you listen to the same kind of music? Do you look at the same kind of things online? Do you play the same kind of games that other kids do? Do you, your words, are they the same kind of words that your friends are using? Or, how are Christians called to live differently? That's a great lesson
yeah.
to know that those things.
Yeah, I just thought this, and of course you do it to every lesson, but that was just an easy example to say, here are some out of the box things. And then I really like the point where you were talking about different ways to respond. Because I taught high school, I kind of got, raise your hand, answer the question. But then when I was teaching elementary school, like at Sunday school, I was like, oh, that it doesn't work the same here. Like I may call on a kid and his answer is so
Yeah.
out there that it distracts the whole class, And so I saw something on Instagram where it was like task and ask. And I thought that's kind of a clever way to represent what you're saying. Like, what different ways can they respond? And can we match that with, because the examples they were giving was everybody give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or like I haven't used them, but I've seen those buttons where it's like a pre-recorded answer and they get to pick, like even if one button says yes and
Oh,
one
that's
says
fun.
no. I think
Hmm.
that would be fun. Or stand up, sit down.
Yeah, in preschool a lot. I love the thumbs up and thumbs down because it's low risk. And even my really timid little 3-year-olds who aren't comfortable yet, they'll still do a thumbs up or thumbs down. So they're listening. And then group answering, like when you give a group response, not everybody's going to respond. But if you do something active, like I like to do, one side of the room is yes and one side of the room is no. So you have to go, move with the group.
Yeah.
And even if you don't know the right answer, you're probably going to go with a group. And so it's very low risk, but it's also very engaging because you know if you're moving to yes or no. And that's a great way to give a group response answer.
Yeah, that's good. I saw that. I went up to church last night when they were doing their Wednesday night activities, and they did that. Like there was one answer on one wall and another answer on another wall, and um like I think it was
It's
agree or
fun.
disagree. And they
Uh-huh.
all moved to either agree or disagree. So I was like, yay,
We
this
did
is cool.
in pre-K probably about a month or so ago, we did truth or trash.
Oh,
And
that's
it
cute.
just kind of happened this way, but I had one side was yes, and then the other side was by the trash can, and so that was like the false answer, you know. So
Uh-huh.
like, is my I would say a statement and then say, is that truth or is that trash? And they thought it was hilarious because they're like, oh, that's trash.
Yeah.
But it was very like it helped them just internalize what I was asking, think through it, and then they had to move to the right answer. So
Yeah.
I it was fun.
Yeah, that is fun. All right, so multiple means of representation. That's really a fun thing to think through. We could talk, I mean, we could use any Bible story and talk through all kinds of different ways
Yes.
for that.
Yes.
So, but all right, what's the third one?
Okay, so the third one, let me see what the real is really called, providing multiple means of action and expression, which is really long. Like I said, I don't really love those names, but this one is about the how of learning. And this is giving kids opportunities to express their understanding, which everybody expresses their understanding in a different way. If you ask the same question of 5 different people, you're going to get 5 different answers. They may be all correct, but they're going to sound different, you know?
Yeah.
So this is like giving kids an opportunity to move, to express their understanding, letting kids express themselves in a variety of ways. Sometimes this is older or easier with older kids, like, you know, letting them have some independent time to work or giving them group opportunity. Another thing is giving kids a way to manage their own learning, and let them know what the learning objective is, what your goals and expectations are, but then helping them figure out how to get to those goals on their own. When they may come up with something completely different than what I would have as a teacher. And then also, this is really about, do kids know what they're supposed to be learning, and do they know how to learn it? And that is giving kids lots of ways to take notes, maybe, or just different ways to catch the information that you're giving them or highlight the information that you're giving them, and just helping them get from point A to point B. That's really what that multiple means of action and expression is. Physical action, different ways to express and communicate, and those executive functioning skills.
Yeah. That's really good. Like I really like your example on even note taking because I went to a conference a few weeks ago and some people were taking notes like you do, but then some people took out their phones and took a picture of
Uh-huh.
the slide that was up. And so I was like, that's multiple ways that they're taking this info because they're hearing it, they're reading
Mhm.
it, there's some of them are writing it. And I was like, that's
Yeah.
really
Which, yeah, I
helpful.
hadn't really thought of that as an example, but that's really good because I'm a writer. Like I want to write something down. Even now, like if I want to, I'll take notes in the class that I'm taking. I actually still write notes rather than
Yeah.
type them out just because it helps me remember.
Yeah.
But some people would rather just, you know, snap a picture and read through that picture again later.
Yeah.
That works for them.
Yeah, I was the only one. I'm taking a statistics class this semester, and I was the only one handwriting notes because the rest of them had their, and I'm the oldest in the class, you know, so I'm used to it. But statistics is really hard, and I was
Yes.
like, how can I make this stick? And I just felt like writing it out would have helped me better than typing it. And even like for me, when I'm writing things out, it's even where on the page I'm writing it, or arrows, or
Yes.
which you can't really do when you're just typing.
Yeah, when I write something out, I can remember, oh yeah, you know, if I'm taking a test or something, I'll like that's on this page and it's at the top left corner. I know know what
Yeah,
it is. It's
yeah,
just really helpful for me. Yeah.
it's really helpful. And I like the idea of this section talking about those executive function skills and how kids can grow in that, and how sometimes they're just you just kind of put markers to say, hey, let's like I think of when you write a paper, like my son, senior in high school, and so paper writing is a bigger deal now because I'm like, hey, I'm not going to be in college with you. I mean, you can send
Mhm,
me your papers, but it's not going to be the same. So I appreciate when his teacher says, first, you're going to turn in an outline, then you're
mhm,
going to turn in a rough draft, then you're going to turn in the final draft. Because I just feel like that will be self-paced when it needs to, like when he's in college it's like, hey, you've got a paper due, but now the teachers are helping him think through things each section, and
mhm,
kind of those executive function checks, like make sure you're progressing the way you need to, and it's helping them
mhm.
get in the pattern of thinking through it that way. So
Yeah, even my third grader brings home like little visual organizers before he has to turn in a bigger project or something. And it has like, what's the objective? What's the main point? Okay, what's three supporting facts about this project? And he has to write those out. Then he has to go find a few more facts to write underneath that. And I really like how they're working on those executive functioning and organizing skills, because Lord knows he needs it,
yeah,
but we all need it.
we do.
And it helps him move toward that goal at his pace. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And like you said, a lot of this comes back to knowing the students and knowing what they need and what their personalities and strengths and all of that. Like, and that's the way they're designed. I think what's unique about those of us with a Christian worldview is we see the marks of their good design from a loving creator. And so when we talk about
Mhm,
even introvert and extrovert, God designed us with those qualities for a
mhm.
purpose, and we glorify him when we express ourselves, in these
Absolutely.
very unique ways. And so I
Yeah, we
even
don't
that
have to make an introvert fit into an extroverted hole or vice versa. Let's use the strengths that the Lord blessed them with for a reason and capitalize on those, and that will just help the child make better faith connections.
yeah. Yeah, because we are sharing the most important message they'll ever hear. And so let's do it in every single way possible. Really,
Yes.
like before you and I hit record, we were talking through Acts 8 because as I was reading, I thought this is kind of a great example of universal design for learning. And so I'll remind everybody, like, we're looking specifically at the story of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. And
Mhm,
so Philip gets called to where the Ethiopian eunuch is, and he's leaving Jerusalem. And it said he had left the temple, and he's sitting and reading scripture. And so Philip, this is verse 30. It says Philip ran to him. I love that because he sees him.
mhm.
The Holy Spirit says, go talk to him. And Philip runs to him and he says, do you understand what you're reading? And then the Ethiopian eunuch says, how can I unless someone guides me? And
Yep.
then, so Philip starts with where he is because he says, what do you like? It's a passage from Isaiah that he's reading. And so it says, verse 35, then Philip opened his mouth, and beginning with this scripture, he told him the good news about Jesus. So he starts with the knowledge he has, right? He's got
Mhm.
this knowledge of Isaiah. He doesn't fully understand what it means because it's a prophecy about the one to come who is Jesus. So Philip fills him in on the whole story. So he has read it, now he's hearing it, and um then you pointed out, and then there's action because he asked if he can get baptized. And so we see all of these different methods just in this kind of short passage in scripture.
I mean, he even asked an opening question. He didn't like run up to him and say, "Hey, let me tell you about X, Y, and Z." And he said, "Do you understand what you're reading?" And I think that was just a way of gauging his strength and gauging where he was so he could move on from there. And that's such a good example.
Yeah. Isn't it fun when you like, we know this, like we know everything we learn, every truth is ultimately from God. And then, but when it's like, when it all comes together in this way, you're like, man, this is it.
It's
Like,
so cool. Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Um, no, that's an exciting way to kind of apply all of this and just think through. We have the good news. We have the full story of Jesus, and let's make sure we are communicating that to the kids and teens and adults in our ministries in as many ways as possible so that they
Yeah,
understand it. I
absolutely.
think of even with my, and I know we're mostly talking about inclusive classrooms, but even with my son James, who doesn't have the verbal ability to like ever confirm faith in Jesus, but still I can be faithful to
Yeah.
present Jesus to him in as many ways as possible. So I'm singing over him. I have these like short phrases that I say and just hey, even if it's Jesus loves you every day,
Mhm. He
that's
hears it. Yeah,
he hears it. Yeah, and I don't fully understand. I mean, I won't know how he understands it, but I still at least I want to be faithful to teaching him.
absolutely. Yes.
So,
And as I just think it's so important as Christians to be an example to the world of how good of a teacher we can be. And if we know these principles that, yes, they're scientific based, but we can also see them in the Bible. If we know these things, then we have to use them and be responsible to just be the best teachers that we can be. Because, like you said, we have the good news, the best message, the most important message. And so we need to be faithful to teach that in really important ways.
yeah, that's awesome. That's exciting. Thanks for chatting
Yeah,
with me today.
love to.
Yeah, and thanks. I'm glad we could let all of our other friends hang out with us for a
Yes,
few minutes today.
yes.
That makes it everything every time I have a question or do something, I'm like, I bet other people have this question. I bet I'm not the only one. And so let me
Mhm.
find an expert, ask all the questions, and then invite other friends in to listen. So it's been a good time. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to make sure you get in, or do you think we covered it all?
Oh, I think we did a pretty good job. I think my main takeaway for like if you don't hear anything else, I think there's two things that I would just really reiterate. Number one, know your kids and know what their strengths are and what interests them and build a relationship with them. That's probably one of the most important things. And then I forgot what I was going to say for number two, actually, but probably just if you don't know how to do something, find somebody that does. Because there probably is somebody out there that can help you or answer that question for you. And um, yeah, just find somebody to help.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I did when I was teaching Sunday school. I looked in the back to see what
Mm.
recommendations were back there, because I was like, I need to be able to apply this in more than one way. And so that's really helpful. The good news is lots of curriculum designers are doing some of the hard work for us. So our
Yes.
big thing is to get to know the kids and then they're supplying the ways that we can meet their needs. So
Yep. And I'm really excited about some things that are going on with Lifeway right now, just their desire to reach more kids with disabilities and be more inclusive in everything that they offer. So I'm excited about what's coming out in the coming years.
yeah, me too. I know. I think this is an exciting time to be part of an inclusion movement and accessibility. And so, because I think like our time together here is super helpful for children's ministers and preschool ministers and family ministers, even if it's not disability specific,
Mhm.
even, but everybody is doing inclusion now. And
Mm-hmm.
so let's make sure that we're using the best practices to meet the needs
Yes.
of our kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, let me wrap up our time to make sure that our friends who are listening know that Disability and the Church Conference is weeks away. And so if you enjoyed this conversation that I had with Tracy today, that happens at Disability in the Church. There's all kinds of conversations like these where we're learning from experts. You can ask questions, you can sit by somebody at lunch that you just want to pick their brain a little bit. It's an awesome time for us to all be together and all be able to have the same passion and have these different ministries and these different experiences, and we bring all that together and learn from it. So make sure that you visit keyministry.org/DATC 2024, and you can still register. There's a group rate if you want to register your whole team to come. I would really love to see you there. So thanks for listening. Thanks so much for your time today, Tracy.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. All right. Have a great week, friends.